Operation MK-Ultra. In 1953, the CIA launched a program so extreme that when it was finally exposed 20 years later, the director of the agency ordered all files related to it destroyed. The order came too late. A batch of documents survived in a financial records building and were discovered during a Freedom of Information request in 1977. What those documents revealed was that the United States government had been conducting systematic mind control experiments on American and Canadian citizens without their knowledge or consent for over a decade. The program involved administering LSD to mental patients, prisoners, drug addicts, and ordinary civilians, sometimes in controlled settings, sometimes slipped into drinks at bars and social gatherings by CIA operatives, who then observed the effects. Subjects were subjected to electroconvulsive therapy, sensory deprivation, hypnosis, and psychological abuse designed to break down existing mental patterns and implant new ones. At least one participant died, a CIA employee named Frank Olson, who fell from a New York hotel window after being secretly dosed with LSD. His death was ruled a suicide. His family has disputed that conclusion for decades. Subsequent investigations confirmed the program had run across at least 80 institutions, including universities, hospitals, and prisons. Nobody was ever prosecuted. Operation Northwoods. In 1962, the Joint Chiefs of Staff presented President John F. Kennedy with a classified proposal that, had he approved it, would have authorized the United States military to carry out terrorist attacks on American soil and blame them on Cuba as justification for a military invasion. The document, declassified in 1997, outlined a series of proposed false flag operations, including bombing American cities, sinking boats carrying Cuban refugees, hijacking American aircraft, and staging the assassination of Cuban immigrants in American streets. The plan explicitly called for the use of American victims to generate public outrage sufficient to justify war. Kennedy rejected it and subsequently fired the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. The existence of Northwoods fundamentally altered how historians and analysts evaluated government claims about pretext for military action, because it demonstrated with documentary evidence that the highest levels of American military leadership had been willing to kill American civilians to manufacture a justification for war they had already decided to pursue. Operation Mockingbird. For decades, American journalists, academics, and foreign policy analysts reported on world events without knowing that some of their colleagues were simultaneously working for the CIA, filing reports, shaping narratives, and steering public opinion on behalf of an intelligence agency operating inside the free press it claimed to be protecting. Operation Mockingbird was the CIA's systematic infiltration of American and international media organizations beginning in the late 1940s. At its peak, the program reportedly involved over 400 journalists and editors across major American news outlets, wire services, and book publishing companies. The Church Committee Congressional Investigation of 1975 exposed the program's existence and scale. The CIA officially claimed it ended the practice of using paid journalists as agents following the investigation. Independent researchers have continued to raise questions about whether the relationship between American intelligence services and major media organizations was ever fully severed or simply made less visible. Operation Ajax. In 1953, the CIA and British intelligence jointly engineered the overthrow of Mohammad Mossadegh, the democratically elected Prime Minister of Iran, and reinstalled the Shah of Iran as an absolute monarch. Mossadegh's crime, from the perspective of Western governments, was nationalizing Iran's oil industry and removing it from British control. The operation involved bribing Iranian politicians, funding opposition media, organizing street protests, and paying criminal gangs to create the appearance of popular uprising. It succeeded. Mossadegh was arrested, tried for treason, and spent the rest of his life under house arrest. The Shah ruled Iran for the following 26 years with increasing brutality, with American backing, until the 1979 Islamic Revolution removed him and produced the anti-American Iranian government that has defined the region's geopolitics ever since. In 2013, the CIA formally acknowledged its role in the coup for the first time. The blowback from that single covert operation reshaped the Middle East for the remainder of the 20th century and into the 21st. Operation Paperclip. When World War II ended in 1945, the United States government made a deliberate decision to recruit former Nazi scientists, including those who had used concentration camp prisoners as experimental subjects, and bring them to America under false identities to work on American military and space programs. The operation was classified and ran in direct contradiction to official American policy, prohibiting the immigration of Nazi war criminals. Over 1,600 German scientists and engineers were brought to the United States under the program. Among the most prominent was Werner von Braun, the architect of the Nazi V-2 rocket program that had been built using slave labor from concentration camps, who became the director of NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center and the chief architect of the Saturn V rocket that sent American astronauts to the moon. The moral calculation the American government made was explicit in internal documents. The value of these men's scientific knowledge was judged to outweigh the crimes they had committed or enabled. The survivors of the camps whose labor had built the rockets those scientists designed were never consulted about that calculation. Operation Chaos. Between 1967 and 1974, the CIA ran a domestic surveillance program targeting American citizens who opposed the Vietnam War, a program that was illegal from its inception because the CIA's charter explicitly prohibits it from conducting operations inside the United States against American citizens. Operation Chaos compiled files on over 7,000 American individuals and 1,000 domestic organizations, including civil rights groups, anti-war organizations, and student movements, through infiltration, mail interception, and surveillance. The program operated in coordination with the FBI's COINTELPRO initiative, creating an interlocking surveillance apparatus targeting political dissent that had no legal authorization and no judicial oversight. When the Church Committee exposed it in 1975 alongside other CIA domestic programs, the revelation contributed directly to the most significant overhaul of American intelligence oversight in the agency's history, including the establishment of the Senate and House Intelligence Committees that were supposed to prevent exactly this kind of abuse from happening again. Operation Gladio. After World War II ended, the CIA and NATO established a network of secret paramilitary organizations across Western Europe, known collectively as Operation Gladio, that were designed to conduct guerrilla warfare and sabotage in the event of a Soviet invasion. The existence of these networks was not publicly known for over 40 years. When Italian Prime Minister Giulio Andreotti revealed their existence in 1990, the disclosure produced one of the most significant political crises in post-war European history, because investigators quickly discovered that the networks had not remained dormant contingency plans. In Italy, evidence emerged linking Gladio-connected operatives to a series of terrorist bombings throughout the 1970s and 1980s, attacks that had been blamed on left-wing and right-wing extremists and had shaped Italian politics for 2 decades. The strategy appeared to involve creating sufficient political violence and instability to prevent left-wing parties from gaining democratic power, using terrorism as a tool of political management in countries the United States considered strategically important. The full scope of what Gladio networks did during those 4 decades has never been officially established. Operation PB Success. In 1954, the CIA overthrew the democratically elected government of Guatemala. President Jacobo Arbenz had implemented land reform policies that included the redistribution of unused land owned by the United Fruit Company, an American corporation with significant political connections in Washington. The operation involved a psychological warfare campaign, the training of a small paramilitary force in Honduras, and a coordinated effort to convince the Guatemalan military that a massive air invasion was imminent when it was not. Arbenz resigned when his military refused to defend the government. What followed was decades of military dictatorship, civil war, and political violence that killed an estimated 200,000 Guatemalans between 1960 and 1996. A truth commission established after the peace agreement concluded that the CIA-backed overthrow of 1954 had been the direct cause of the conditions that produced the subsequent conflict. The operation was declassified in 1997. It remains the most thoroughly documented example of the CIA removing a democratic government to protect corporate interests, and the template for similar operations that followed across Latin America throughout the Cold War. If you made it this far, drop a comment below. Let us know which operation shocked you the most. Subscribe so you never miss an upload. There's a lot more where this came from.